Hi everybody, welcome to the Frontline Club. Before I hand over to Victoria Schofield, who's going to be chairing tonight's event, can I please ask you to switch your phones to silent? At the end, when we do questions, can you wait for the mic to come around for the benefit of our online audience? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Millie. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be at the Frontline Club, and we have tonight a really excellent panel in order to discuss the vexed issue of Kashmir, which comes up and down on our international agenda and nonetheless remains a very important issue for us to discuss. Now, just briefly, we have 5 panelists. On my extreme left, Lawrence Sayez, Senior Lecturer in Comparative and International Politics at the School of Oriental and African Studies, and he has a special expertise on Pakistan and India, and we've known each other for many years. And then we have Subhash Chopra, former The Times journalist and author of a new book called Partition, Jihad and Peace, South Asia After Bin Laden. And then we have on my left here Ashish Ray, journalist for The Times of India and former CNN South Asia Bureau Chief and consultant editor. On my right, we have Mirza Waheed, a journalist and novelist who was born and brought up in the Valley of Kashmir. He joined the BBC's Urdu service in London in 2001, and his first novel is The Collaborator, set in the Valley of Kashmir in his hometown during the early 1990s, and certainly is well worth a read if you want to understand what was going on in the Valley of Kashmir during the insurgency. And finally, we have Imran Khan, who's correspondent for Al Jazeera English, and he's living currently in Doha and has reported extensively on Pakistan, Afghanistan, and across the Middle East. And he has an intricate knowledge of the Pakistani-administered side of Kashmir. Now, just briefly before we start, I want to just fix on your minds, unfortunately, we don't have a map, but as you all know, and forgive me if this is something you do all know very well, but just for those of you who don't know, we're talking about the state of Jammu and Kashmir as it existed as a former princely state. It was one of over 500 princely states, and independence in 1947, its future remained unresolved. In other words, it didn't become either part of India or part of Pakistan. There was an expectation at that time that the whole state would either go to India or go to Pakistan. For a number of reasons, which I won't go into now, that didn't happen. But after a war in 1948-49, a ceasefire line was drawn, dividing on the ground this state between India and Pakistan. Roughly 1/3, which includes the vast area of Gilgit-Baltistan and a narrow strip of land which the Pakistanis refer to as Azad Jammu and Kashmir, that's free Jammu and Kashmir, remains under Pakistani administration. And the Indian side, the Indian-administered side of Kashmir, which again includes another vast terrain, Ladakh, and also the very beautiful Valley of Kashmir and a less hilly region, Jammu, remains under Indian administration. Tonight, I think we're going to refer to these regions by the names by which the people who live there refer to them. In other words, for the Pakistani side, it's Azad Jammu and Kashmir, or AJK for short, and the Indian side is the Indian Kashmir, or the Valley of Kashmir, or that's how they call it. They call it Jammu and Kashmir. The pejorative names, which you're familiar with, on the Indian side are POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir, and on the Pakistani side, IHK, Indian Held Kashmir. But we're not going to use those terms tonight. We're going to stick with the terms by which both sides use for their own particular area which they administer. I hope that's clear. Now, we're going to just talk among ourselves for a short while, and then we're going to open our discussion to the chair, to the floor. Sorry, I'm the chair. The first thing I think we want to talk about, and perhaps I'm going to address my question to you, Mirza, first, as somebody who is from the Valley of Kashmir. Can you just tell us briefly where we're at the moment with the Valley of Kashmir? What would you say is the sort of litmus test of what would make the Kashmiris happy living in the valley?
Can I go back to last year? We had this uprising in the valley, where hundreds of thousands of young people came out in the streets protesting against Indian rule, which has happened in Kashmir before. When I was growing up, that would happen. People come on the streets and protest.
Can you all hear me?
Can you hold me? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were these massive protests sparked off by by an ugly episode where 3 peasants were killed in the mountains of Kashmir in April 2010, and they were passed off as dreaded militants, which they were not. It was it was uncovered. The story was a newspaper broke the story because the parents of these 3 young men saw their photographs in the newspaper, and they were described as militants, whereas they were poor peasants. That led to the protests and the killing of a teenager in police action. The protests continued throughout the summer, and at the end of which we had 119 young people dead. They were killed on the streets. And I refer to that as they were murdered on the streets, because these were not militants, these were not armed insurgents, these were not terrorists. They were young boys. The youngest was 8. And so I was in London, and I wondered what is the response of the Indian state to this uprising. It was spontaneous. People were angry. And it was exactly the same response as I had seen myself firsthand in the early 90s, when there was an armed insurgency. There was a military crackdown on the insurgents. You engage them in battles and you kill some. That's what happens. But 20 years later, in 2010, the response of the Indian state was exactly the same. They killed these boys on the streets. They had no answer to this. So they were trying to, I began to think of it as they were trying to kill their way out of this uprising, the Indian state, I mean, which was a very upsetting and sort of distressing scenario for all of us, for Kashmiris in Kashmir and outside Kashmir. That it's been 20 years now, and everyone knows what the situation is, what the dispute is. People want to be given a chance to decide their future. By way of a plebiscite, by way of a referendum. Mechanisms can come later, and that right has been denied consistently and brutally, especially since 1989, but also before, since 47. And so that's where we are now. There is this, people haven't forgiven the Indian state or the local representatives of the Indian state for these killings. And tragically, there has not been a single conviction. Nobody has been charged with these killings.
Well, this has always been the issue, that there isn't accountability.
There's no accountability.
Yes.
You can any.
Let's Mirza, let's get a sort of a view from the. Where are you sitting there, Imran? from the Pakistani administered side. When you talk, because you've talked, Mirza, and for the benefit of our audience, about the Kashmiris wanting the plebiscite. What are the Kashmiris living in the Pakistani administered side, AJK one? Where does this put Kashmir? Are we talking solely about the valley being disaffected, or are we talking about a greater area being disaffected?
Well, we're talking about a greater area being disaffected. You've got to realise that the Pakistanis have a very standard narrative when it comes to Kashmir. They say that they've done everything possible to try and negotiate with the Indians to try and get a solution to this conflict. Predominantly what they've done is the Pakistani side is independent from Pakistan. It has its own prime minister, has its own president, has its own parliament. So the idea that there is a Kashmir that exists a fully functioning state. Now, you can argue, and it's a strong argument, that actually what that's done is it's lulled the Kashmiris in Azad Kashmir into a false sense of security, that they feel like they have this independence. It's independence on paper. Pretty much Pakistan does run that side of Kashmir. But there's like I say, there's a standard narrative from the Pakistanis that say, we have done everything possible. We've tried to negotiate with the Indians, we've tried to highlight their human rights abuses, we've talked to the Indians several times, and every time we're anywhere near a solution, anywhere near getting a resolution to the conflict, the Indians pull something out. You can argue whether that's actually true or not, but that's the standard narrative from the Pakistani side. And what the Pakistanis now feel is that the plebiscite needs to happen. If you speak to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they say, well, it needs to be a vote, a referendum. The Kashmiris themselves need to decide. What they're hoping is the Kashmiris will cede to Pakistan.
Well, that seems, yes. Well, that's sort of going back to what might have happened in 1947, but we do have a sort of fully fledged Indian freedom movement going on as well for independence. I mean, can I ask you, Ashish, from the Indian perspective, where do you think the government of India's gone wrong? It has been 20 years that we've had an insurgency, really. If we date it from 1989, then there's been sort of previous disaffection if we go back to 1947. But the actual insurgency in the valley has been going on for 20 years.
Well, mine is not an Indian perspective. Mine is a factual narration.
Good. Let's have also a factual perspective.
Let's put the truth first before anything else. 1989 happened because of various reasons. In 1989, if you remember, the Soviet troops pulled out of Afghanistan. And there was a great expectation in the West that Kabul would fall literally the next day. It didn't happen. Najibullah, for whatever reason, held out. There was a tremendous flow of arms from the West to Pakistan, which were then supposed to be handed over to the Mujahideen to fight their battle in Afghanistan and win power. It didn't happen. What happened was that those arms that were sent were diverted to elements who were interested in whipping up trouble in Indian-controlled Kashmir. And I'd prefer to use the word control because that is the factual term. The line is called the line of control. Azad Kashmir is also a questionable term because whether that part of Kashmir is Azad or not is certainly debatable.
Yes, I think we're aware of that. We won't
and therefore, I wouldn't say that it is Azad Indian Kashmir, and I wouldn't say Azad Pakistani Kashmir.
No part of Kashmir is Azad.
So it is controlled by India. The factual situation is 2/3 of Jammu and Kashmir is controlled by India, 1/3 by Pakistan. Now, in that scenario, as I said, there were certainly rumblings of resistance. There was certainly disaffection among a section of people in Indian-controlled Jammu and Kashmir. But this was aided, abetted, fueled by Pakistan. This is a fact of history. There is no denying it. Everybody knows who was behind it. It was the Pakistani government and its agencies which were behind it. The United States today has made it clear that they have satellite evidence of arms being transferred from Pakistan to Kashmir for purposes.
We're not disputing that. We're actually trying to look at where we're going.
But I wanted to clarify that because I think one should not think that this is some totally homegrown movement in the Indian part of Jammu and Kashmir. And let us also not forget, after 20 years, as you say, more than 20 years, 1989 is when it happened. The Indian situation was a little delicate. There was an election taking place, and there was a weak government. What was at least seen to be weak by Pakistan came into office, and Pakistan certainly saw this as an opportunity. And a section of people in Kashmir also felt that if the Soviet Union could have been driven back from Afghanistan, what is India? India will fall like 9 pins, and therefore there was a sway towards, sentimentally, there was a sway towards Pakistan, which built up in that 89 period. Now,
well, I think.
I would like to take issue with a couple of points. Can I do it now or?
Yes.
I would like to take issue with a number of points.
No. I think. Can we just?
Two things.
I think we mustn't go back. So we're looking at how.
No, but I think it's important because I think you started by saying that there was no resolution in 1947, but that is not entirely correct.
That is
the accession did take place.
Why are we talking about the issue today here?
I think we must agree.
I think it is a manufactured conflict.
When you say in 1989 there were few people, segments of society who rose up, I was there. It was the entire population of Kashmir.
Well, I'm sorry, I disagree with you. Facts and statistics don't tell that story.
I think we mustn't get into too much of a sort of a controversy over the history. You have your point of view, and I was wanting to hear your point of view, but what we're looking for is a complicated issue which we've got to move forward.
Well, the simple summary, if you
know,
want a summary, it is this. 85% of Kashmiris voted in a free and fair election in local elections in Kashmir this year. But is there any better proof of democracy and participation?
Sure, you have to let
Yes,
me intervene
I know.
here.
We know that there is disaffection among the group of
There
Kashmiris,
is, of course,
and this is what we're trying to
there is
resolve and get to
disaffection.
the root at.
But it is also true that the opinion survey that was carried out by King's College and Chatham House also said that 50% of people in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir do not wish to be a part of Pakistan. Let us take that into account
same
as well.
survey also said 70% of people want independence.
Yes, I think
That's a separate
Which
issue.
you left out.
That's not
We're talking about this or
We
that.
must
That's
know.
not a separate
issue. That's connected.
We mustn't
and
get
we were
into the
told that
blame
this
game.
is not the Indian perspective.
Yes.
The Indian perspective is a democratic perspective.
The Indian
It is a democratic perspective.
Can I have order amongst my panel, please? We mustn't get into the blame game. We learn about conflict resolution. One has to draw a line on past grievances and move forward. And what we're trying to do, and what you very eloquently demonstrated to us, that it was at one time an Indo-Pak dispute. But as we know, particularly in the last 20 years, there is this new element which has risen up, really, which was not regarded in the earlier discussions, and that happens to be the Kashmiri people. And we do know that there
No, but that has always been there. It's always been there.
They have not, when the idea for partition, it was either that the people should choose between India or Pakistan. Now we have an element and a segment of society that are talking about azadi, freedom, independence, autonomy. And I think we want to explore that.
Azadi has been spoken about
But
since the 1950s.
I think the issue now is it's being framed in a different way. Like people are, particularly in Pakistan, in Azad Kashmir, people are now talking about it as something that could happen, that the Kashmiri people need their own will. And the Indian argument, I'm only going from what the Indian government, this is certainly not my, from the Pakistani government, this is certainly not my argument, but it's, allow the Kashmiris their voice. And every time they try and rise up, every time they want their voice, and this is, again, from the Pakistani government perspective, the Indians crush them. And that's really what we're talking
crushing
about.
is a very, very
it's a
extreme
Pakistani
term.
government word.
Okay, I'm going to...
70,000 people killed. What would you call it?
There has been collateral damage, as in any
There
has been collateral damage.
Ashish, I'm going to take
If you compare the collateral damage that has taken place, if you compare the collateral damage that's taken place in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, even the bombing of its own people by Pakistani forces, the bombings in Swat, in Waziristan, there has never been a single incident of the Indian Air Force being ever used in any part of Indian territory.
So right, Ashish, I think we're going to have to take the heat off you. I'm going to ask now for a contribution from Lawrence.
Well, if you're looking for to go the heat,
Yes.
you're really looking at the wrong place.
I think we need to put the perspective of where we're at now, rather than just batting round past grievances and certainly the rhetoric that's been very current in over decades. As a sort of analyst, where do you think? What hope is there? Do we need a round table? Do we need discussions between India and Pakistan? Do we need discussions between India and the Kashmiris? Where can we move from here?
Well, I think that you need to kind of realize a couple of things. First of all, the valley itself is settled much better than it was 20 years ago. I went vacationing there, so I wouldn't have been able to do that 10 or 20 years ago. And so the valley itself does rise up from time to time. It is a situation that is moving in the direction of Indian control, whether you like it or not. And so this rising up will continue, and it may be something that we'll have to look at in the future. I think that's what the Kashmiris in the valley need to do, which they haven't done, is to actually have, for lack of a better word, a PR strategy. They've done a catastrophic job of promoting their cause. When I look at Burma, when I look at Tibetans, they have some figurehead, kind of a person that people can rally to around. And in the issue in Kashmir, there are 20 different groups with 40 different claims, and each hating each other as much as they hate the Indian state. And so I think that first thing they need to do is realize what they need to do to obtain their objective, whatever it may be. Some want independence from India, someone joining with the Pakistani side of Kashmir, some want some other configuration, and so they need to work that out first. Once they do that, then you can then move forward in terms of addressing what their problems are, which are quite severe. First of all, the biggest problem they face, of course, is that the Indian state is not going to let Kashmir go, whether they made a promise to have a plebiscite or not. It is a fact. India has changed dramatically since the 1940s and the 1950s. Now it's a much more powerful military force, and so it's not going to give up that this belly on account of claims that it is that these people are severely oppressed, which I think in many respects they are. The other fact that we have to take into account, which I think nobody wants to talk about, is that part of Kashmir, this mythical Kashmir, is under Chinese control, and they are not a country that are very eager to give up control over territory, and so any type of negotiation in the future would have to include China. So you have
Do
to
you seriously think so? China occupies a stretch of land where nobody lives. How can they possibly claim to be a party to any discussions on Kashmir's future?
Because India makes a claim that it is the owner of all, the entire area, and so, including that section. And so it is. If you have a resolution, you have first to have a resolution internally. What is it that the Kashmiris want in the valley? Do they represent the views of all the Kashmiris, which I don't think they do, and because they're obviously a large, sizable Hindu population, which wouldn't agree to independence or partition of some form. And then you have to kind of have a bilateral and trilateral agreement between India and Pakistan as to what would happen. Would Pakistan accept an independent Kashmir? In my view, it wouldn't accept that. For most governments, wouldn't accept that, and neither would India. So you have a situation that will have to involve both India and Pakistan at some level. And since India is making a claim on the Aksai Chin section of Kashmir, that's something that will have to be resolved as well. So I'm very pessimistic that this will happen, and so what we're left with is essentially a war of attrition, which the Indian state appears to be winning more successfully. The insurgency failed really to liberate Kashmir, if that's what their objective was, and so that will have to change. They'll have to determine what their tactics are to succeed in for whatever ultimate goal they have.
I mean, are we perhaps talking about autonomy? Subhash, can I bring you in here? Perhaps you can give me your view in terms of whether the Kashmiris should settle down in the Indian-controlled part and just accept being part of India, or whether there is some future they might aspire to which is not complete full-blown independence, but is perhaps autonomy.
I think the problem, or where we go next, as you said, there is a lot of pessimism about India and Pakistan, and especially over Kashmir. And I think it is far too much pessimistic. If we take the history, the common things which have survived in spite of wars, in spite of battles, say for instance, Indus Water Treaty has survived 60 years. The LOC line of control in Kashmir, that has survived so many years. And over the last 20 years, India and Pakistan have been regularly and religiously exchanging information on nuclear installations on the 1st of every year, 1st of January of every year. Then there have been fresh signals over the last few weeks and months. For instance, just a few weeks ago, there was an Indian military plane strayed over to the Pakistani-controlled side of Kashmir, and it was very amicably sent back. There was no sort of hoo-ha about it. And on the India-Pakistan border at Wagah, and Atari and Wagah, between Lahore and Amritsar, there has taken a symbolic change, because earlier, for the last 60 years, the Indian and Pakistani soldiers used to do a boot-to-boot battle rehearsal, taking one's boot to the other side's face. Every day it was
Yes,
happening.
it was quite a spectacle.
This year, Eid greetings and gifts have been exchanged. And these two things, the release of the military plane and the exchange of greetings, could not have taken place without the Pakistani military being on the board.
So it's nice
So
to hear some
it's-
encouraging news.
It is a lot more encouraging.
That's
and
encouraging. But
more-
that's encouraging
more-
for
more
the
than-
Pakistani Indians. But what we're here to talk about is
it
Kashmir, and that's.
It
that-
is
I
encouraging
can't
for
see-
everybody. And then there is this recent election of Pakistan to the non-permanent seat of Security Council. India not only actively supported, almost lobbied for it, and then the Pakistani government has thanked India for that. And going further, there is Pakistan is now thinking of granting so-called MFN status, trade status. There's nothing most favored nation. There's nothing favored about it, because Pakistan has already granted it to 100 other countries, and India granted to Pakistan nearly 15 years ago. It's just symbolic, but things are happening, and
but
everybody is on board. Just one more point, that Pakistan's foreign minister in Turkey, Hina Rabbani Khan, she recently said that if in any conference on Afghanistan, lots of conferences being held, was one in London where Pakistan took objection to India even attending this conference, and the US and British lobby, they bowed to Pakistani idea, and India was not even allowed to enter this meeting. Now, Pakistan's own foreign minister in Turkey has said that if Pakistan has no problem if India comes and joins conferences on Afghanistan, etc.
Well,
so there's a lot.
Yes, but that
lot
is
of it
very much
coming.
the Indo-Pak relationship. And
Yeah,
are we saying that if the Indo-Pakistanis resolve their relationship, that's going to resolve the Kashmir issue? Is that what we're actually saying? Can we have a
It may help, however, there are always preconditions, because you cannot normalize relations between the two countries unless you solve Kashmir. So where do you start? Yes, it's good, economy, trade,
The idea
everything. Those are nice things. The central dispute, the central issue is Kashmir. And I have no doubt about it. India is holding Kashmir by force. It's an occupation. There is 700,000 military personnel are in Kashmir as we speak, which makes it the biggest military presence in the world anywhere. It's twice the number of soldiers that were in Iraq at the peak of American occupation. What do they do there? They're not on tourist packages there. Why are they there? And that's what Kashmiris are saying, that this is madness. There's a soldier to every 16 citizens in Kashmir, and I've seen it firsthand. It's brutal. You're not normal anymore. And since we were talking about facts, last week the senior most general in Kashmir, who's the main commanding officer, General Hasnain, said if a dark law called AFSPA, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which is the darkest law anywhere in the world. It means any member of the security forces can kill anyone on mere suspicion, and they won't be punished. They won't be charged. Nothing will happen. It's so draconian, it's so dark that even Draco will sort of probably die of shame. And I've seen it in action. It's just this mad, completely evil law. Can I just finish? Can I just finish? So the general said last week that if AFSPA is removed from Kashmir, Kashmir will be independent by 2016. Such precision, If the senior most officer serving India in Kashmir thinks that this law, if it's removed, Kashmir will be free, what does that say? And you
I think
cannot,
just,
and you cannot, you cannot.
just before that, I think one of the problems with this whole narrative is that the Indians and Pakistanis have talked so much between themselves over the issue of Kashmir. We have rarely heard from Kashmiris themselves. There have been very rare international conferences involving Kashmiris. There are very few Kashmiri voices that you hear. Mirza and I had this talk, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where I asked him, why isn't there the same type of writing as there is about India, as about Pakistan? Why isn't there that kind of writing about Kashmir? Why aren't young Kashmiris rising up? He was very encouraging about it, saying that there are websites now, the youth are acting up, people are talking about it. But internationally, have a look, go to your library. There are very, very few books written about Kashmir. The Kashmiri voice, I think, has been lost. And that, to me, is where this goes next. It has to go back to the Kashmiri people.
I have
Well,
one small point about, because it mentioned the mass graves in your event description. Close to 8,000 graves have recently been discovered in Kashmir in the mountains. Some of them mass graves containing more than one torso. And if it happened in any other part of the world, I would expect international outcry and then widespread condemnation. And it didn't happen. And there's a lot of dead people who you're not accounted for, who killed them, why they were killed. Yes, some of them are militants who were killed in fighting within the armed forces. But a government human rights body recently said about 1,500 in the mountains of the valley were local people who were killed and passed off as militants. Now, Kashmiris begin to ask, had these mass graves been made in Tripoli or Iraq, the story would have been different.
Well, this brings in, we've got two interesting points here. One is the reaction of the international community, and also, I think, within that, where is Kashmir in relation to the Arab Spring? Would we have an Arab Spring in Kashmir? Or are they not motivated enough? Are Kashmiris not upset enough that they're going to go out on the streets? In the early 90s, they were out on the streets.
We had an Arab Spring before the Arab Spring in 2010. But as I said, it was brutally suppressed. These were not armed people. These were young boys, 17, 20, who were on the streets every day knowing that the next bullet is going to be fired at my chest. They would still come out protesting against Indian rule. They were killed, 119 of them. We had an Arab Spring.
Well, the problem is, let me just say,
if I may say something, I think that we need to, first of all, the image that the international community has of Kashmir is perhaps an unfortunate one, but it's one where you have some bearded person, no offense to anybody who's bearded, holding some kind of knife, decapitating a tourist. That's the image that Kashmiris themselves have created for themselves, and they need to change that. Kashmiris, reasonable Kashmiris have to say this doesn't represent our views. They represent extreme views that we reject completely. That hasn't happened, and so therefore, when you have
it's not the Kashmiris' fault to have this image projected internationally. It is the Indian statist propaganda that aids this as well. It's not just Kashmiris don't say, today, tomorrow I'm going to be a moderate. Next day I'm going to be this bearded nutcase. There is no radical Wahhabist.
Yes, fine. I'm not agnostic on the issue. I think it's just it's an image, and a real image that people have.
You
about
really
Kashmir.
think that image when there's, for instance, that people associate Lashkar-e-Toiba with the Kashmiris?
Well, and there's, you were saying not to talk about history, which is kind of ironic from a historian.
No, I wasn't. I was
but we
trying
have,
to get
the image that I have as well of Kashmiris or with Kashmiri links are, you can't forget essentially that, for instance, the attack in Mumbai in 2008. And so we can have go all day about how the Indians and Pakistanis are going to get along and they're going to play cricket together and so on. That's not the world I live in. The world I live in is that these incidents happen and all those things collapse. And so the image that people have of this specific cause, for better or worse, and I think it's an unfortunate image that they need to change. Kashmiris need to say, we do not believe in this type of violence. We do not believe in indiscriminately going into train stations and killing people. That doesn't represent us. And we want to disavow ourselves from that and from the Pakistani state supporting anybody who provides weapons to us. That hasn't happened, and until that happens,
by the way, those were not Kashmiris who attacked.
Well, no, but they were,
I just thought I should check.
I understand that,
well, let me just get back.
But they represent views that they were supportive.
See, can I just? This is just. What are we talking about? PR and things like that is different. Last year, Kashmiris did exactly what you're saying. that they made a marked departure from the armed resistance of the 90s, since 2008 and 2009 and 2010. And that's what the message was. We are peaceful protesters, but we want our rights, we want our right to decide our future, we want our fundamental right to self-determination to be given to us. It wasn't done through weapons.
Right.
They were coming on.
But also, I mean, the international media has a huge role to play here. I mean, the question you ask is why isn't the Arab Spring happened in Kashmir? Like as I said, it did happen. There were people out on the streets. However, it just wasn't covered by anybody. Now, I covered the Arab Spring for Al Jazeera English. I did the social networking side. I saw what it was like on Twitter, on Facebook, using all the basic tools, mobile phones, etc. And you saw, I mean, even today in Egypt now, you see that that's how they organize. But the Kashmiris themselves, they just didn't have those kinds of tools and didn't have support. Nobody flew into Kashmir to cover this. From international correspondents, almost ignored what was going on. The problem is, the argument has always been framed for the international media between India and Pakistan, and Kashmir is just one element of that. Nobody's ever actually gone, well, you know what, Kashmir is a separate issue. And it needs to be, I mean, there's no Muzaffarabad correspondent.
Are we also looking at a situation where, I mean, particularly in the relation to the United States, that the United States is very interested in good relationship with India, and it's not prepared to put its neck out to support a movement which it doesn't actually understand, which doesn't, as Lawrence has said, have a spokesman that speaks the language that
that's exactly it. For far too long, the narrative has been dominated by what India and Pakistan want. And even in the foreign ministry of Pakistan, I spent a lot of time there speaking to a lot of different people, and it's always the Pakistani idea is this is the idea. And every time you say to them, well, how many Kashmiris have you spoken to? How many, when was the last time you visited Kashmir? And the answer is always, this is a Pakistani issue. So for me, that's, from the Pakistani side, both sides are entrenched. And neither of them want to move on, on anything that allows the Kashmiris an independent voice. And I think that's what needs to happen now. We need to be in a position.
Attention to the Kashmir, to the plight of Kashmiris and the dispute. In the last year or so, we've had two Western heads of state visiting India, both Prime Minister Cameron and President Obama. And both of them went to India and walked away with massive trade deals, billions of dollars worth, arms deal, which includes sale of arms as well. So that's part of the question, part of the answer. Would they want to upset this big economic power by raising the K word, as it's sometimes condescendingly called? No. In fact, Obama dropped the K word famously from his initial pledge. He had said that the solution in Afghanistan goes through Kashmir, and then things happened and he dropped it because there's trade to be done. That's part of the issue.
And also on the Pakistani side, particularly, just very, very quickly. I was in 2008. I visited Kashmir, and one of the things that struck me, the Pakistan side, one of the things that struck me then was people were full of hope. They wanted a solution. I visited there in 2010. It was the last time I went. And there was a disillusionment. They were like, well, people have just forgotten about us, so we're just happy with the status quo. I want to be the line of control, just make it permanent, and I'm happy.
Sorry, on this side, this is
on the Pakistani side.
On the Pakistani side.
Just forget about what's going on.
Subhash, you had a point that you wanted to make.
There's people. He was saying that there's a Arab Spring before the last year's demonstrations. There has been no Arab Spring there because the situation in Kashmir, in Indian Kashmir or Indian-controlled Kashmir, is far different from what you have in Arab countries. You may not agree, but the people of Kashmir, they have had elections before those demonstrations and after those elections. And all those elections are being participated by the people of the country.
You can't
ignore it. You can't ignore it. And once, when you were talking about the human rights human rights is a two-way street. It's not one way. And for your information, 80 military officers or Jawans have been convicted, one of them for 12 years in jail, So don't say that they have a free.
But you
right.
wouldn't need to convict them if they weren't there.
I think we must have order on the panel. Ashish, yes, you haven't spoken for a while. Perhaps
Yes, I think absolutely. It's about time.
it's about time we heard some more from you.
There's been a thing called the ballot box in Indian-controlled Kashmir, and people have a right to express their opinion. The separatists have a right to set up parties, fight those elections, win if they can. The fact of the matter is, and this is a brutal fact, that this separatism is a minority factor in Indian-controlled Jammu and Kashmir. Let there be no doubt about this. If there is every opportunity anywhere in the world, if there is no opportunity to come to power through the ballot box, you can say that rights are being denied. But there is no denial of rights to any separatist movement in Jammu and Kashmir to stand and fight elections and win elections if they have to. The best estimate that there has ever been, the best, and this was in 89, 90, early 90s, of the kind of support that separatists may have enjoyed in Jammu and Kashmir was 35%. 35% of the people supported it. Significant number, but that number has dwindled. The last 20 years have proved many things. One is the self-destruction of Pakistan. It's a non-option today as far as the Pakistan situation is concerned. It has made itself into a non-option. Yes, if there is an aspiration for freedom, for autonomy among the people of Jammu and Kashmir in Indian-controlled Jammu and Kashmir, they have every right to go ahead with their movement in a peaceful manner, in a democratic manner, and there can be negotiations. But it is
so do you
their
feel like
first
you have a
port,
choice? Do you
their
feel like you have a
first-
voice
their
as a
first
Kashmiri?
port- excuse me, the first port of
I think it's
call,
time to bring
excuse
Mirza in.
me,
Yes,
we will bring
the
Mirza
first
in.
port of call is the Chief Minister, the elected Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. The people of Kashmir can go to the Chief Minister, the elected government, and express their demand. It is a state matter, it's a regional matter. That's the way democracy works, that's the way Indian democracy works. And India, by the way, is a democracy.
In theory, it should work.
I've heard similar sermons in the Indian parliament by Indian politicians who believe in the state. Can I go back to the elections? The year is 1996. There was an election in Kashmir. I went from Delhi. I flew from Delhi to Srinagar on the day of the election. You know, I went to my family, walked from the airport to the lake, then took a boat to get home. And I asked my people, my parents, and I lived there, how was the election? They said, what election? We don't have a choice.
You're referring to the bad election.
Can I-
One bad election
Shush,
since
please,
1947.
Ashish, please. I think we gave you a big floor. Let me
You put forward the government of India's position. Now let me
No,
put
it
forward
is not
Kashmiri
the government
position.
of it is the people's position. The government
can
of
we
position,
not get
the
so
government of
heated,
India's
please?
position is different. It's completely different. It is the
very
people's
similar
position.
from what
And let
used
me
to be
tell you, that if there is
Ashish,
anybody
what
in
was
this
the last
room,
year in
excuse me,
Ashish.
I don't know how many people there are in this room who has toured and covered both sides of Jammu and Kashmir for international media.
Can I speak now?
I think I'm just
there aren't
actually-
many.
Can I
And
say-
then
Ashish,
only would you
Ashish.
understand the
Can I-
situation on the
Ashish,
two
can I
sides.
just
I've had the
Can I
privilege
speak?
of
Can I
being
speak?
on both sides, and therefore I happen to know the
I
ground
happen
realities.
to grow up there. I just happen to grow up there.
I think what we're going to do now
I
is
need
we're
to
going
answer
to
one question.
open
One
the floor.
question about elections, because this is a bogey that has been used time and again. If elections were the solution, there would be no dispute. If they have had elections, if those were the solution, if elections...
There is
So
no
can I-
dispute.
can I-
It's
can
a
I-
dispute. It is a dispute in the
Ashish,
minds
I
of the few.
I think there is.
There is no
I
dispute.
think we
Mind
must
of the few,
now open
500,000
discussion.
people marched against Indian rule last summer.
Yes, fine, so be it,
Mirza,
and so be
Mirza.
it, and let them
Let's
demonstrate.
give-
They have a right to demonstrate, and they have a right to negotiate.
Ashish,
They have
the
a right
bottom
to
line,
demand.
the bottom
Thank you
line
very
here
much.
is,
I mean,
can we
if
have-
this is a war of the mind, then why do you have 70,000 troops in Indian control
Imran.
That is again a
700,000.
figment of
we
people's,
Sorry, my
a
mistake.
figment
Ashish,
of people's.
please, I'm going to open
if
the
I
discussion
Your
now
own
to the
general
floor.
says we
the
can't
total
leave.
Yes,
strength,
sir.
the total strength. Now, this is the figment of people's imagination. The total strength of the Indian army is 1 million. Are you mad to have 700,000 in Kashmir?
Ashish, can we now? I
The
think we've
police, the paramilitary forces, and the rest of them maybe make up about 500,000.
Ashish,
It is not
let's-
the Indian army.
Let's give our audience, who've been listening very patiently to what really has been quite a heated discussion now, have their chance to put questions to all of the panelists, and I'm sure you'll have questions as well. So we've got the microphone roving, have we?
Can I speak?
And
Can you
there
hear me?
was a lady here who was very
A lady?
keen. Okay, no, it's not a lady. Right, you've got the
Yeah.
microphone. Can you identify yourself and say...
My name is Jasir. I'm a student at SOAS, and I come from Kashmir, so I've lived most part of my
Which
life there.
part of Kashmir? Can
Indian occupied Kashmir. I would use this term.
Okay.
So I don't care if offend
We're-
someone here.
We're trying to keep...
So
we're trying to keep...
I have no
compassion
apologies
here.
to offer for this. Just a word about elections, first of all. He mentioned about 96 elections, just one bad election. Maybe he needs to revisit history books and check out 87 elections, how massively they have been rigged, and elections before. And more importantly, how would
It's the
you...
same election that you're talking about. 86, 87, there's the same election.
96 and
I didn't say
87.
anything about 96.
Okay,
Yes, we-
it's all right.
okay.
You can go on about it.
Make a quick point.
Yeah.
please.
Just a brief point about fundamentally how would India's position, change in the sense that it has been argued in the past that how it is a nuclear flashpoint between India and Pakistan. They were almost went to war in 2003 when there was a standoff on the border. I just want to ask to all of the panelists: do you think that they can go back to the position if this issue is not resolved?
Sorry, your question is, do you think that this is a nuclear flashpoint?
Yeah, it has been in the past.
Who do you want to address your question to? I think if we have 5 answers, we'll be
Yeah,
quite
it's
fine.
free for all.
Oh dear.
Nobody
Alright.
wants a war between Pakistan and India that goes nuclear. Nobody is interested in that. Both sides, like we say, exchange on a regular basis information about nuclear sites. Nobody wants that. I can tell you from the Pakistani part, and speaking to Pakistani military and politicians, that the idea of a nuclear war is unthinkable. However, the reason that they have weapons is to make that idea unthinkable. So.
Right. Do we have a contribution from this side here also on
the
could it go back to
probability
being a
of-
nuclear flashpoint?
Well, I think that I'm actually a pessimist. I mean, I'm always a pessimist because I'm always proven right in these issues. But I think that, unfortunately, on this one, I'm not. I think that there is a balance of power that if there were a nuclear war or a confrontation, then Pakistan would be decapitated from that exchange. And so it's obviously not in the interest of Pakistan to think that way. On the Indian side, actually, people do. I mean, I've been involved in kind of war scenarios where they actually seriously consider what would be the possibilities of actually carrying such an attack, what would be the losses. As I'm sure the Pakistani military should undertake.
I mean,
so it's not unthinkable. It's not unthinkable. It's unlikely, but it would be occasioned by something really if there were an attack like there was in '47.
There's a very basic business idea here as well. India is a rising economy. It's going to be one of the most powerful economies in the world. It can't afford a war.
There is one scary scenario, though. I mean, there can be war, but yes, nuclear war may not happen. The scariest scenario for me is within Kashmir. If the current generation of Kashmiris don't see any progress, and they've been protesting for forever now, and if Kashmiris are not given their right to self-determination, there can be a return to armed insurgency again, which would be scarier than the 90s, which would be very, very dangerous.
Absolutely.
That is the scary scenario for me, because these are people who are saying we don't want to take up the gun, but we want our rights. We want these troops to leave Kashmir. If you don't listen to them, the dangers are they will have no choice, and nobody wants that. Even they don't want them. I've talked to people. I go home every year, as opposed to people who've been there, God knows when. They say we don't want the gun. We don't want armed insurgency. They know what it.
They've got the ballot. They've got the ballot. So don't know.
But there's just one point, if I may. If I may, Victoria, just one point.
One brief point. We've got lots of questions.
There will not be another war between India and Pakistan.
Good.
The way forward will be the formula that India and China have adopted. It is the only sensible way forward. The Peace and Tranquility Treaty, which has converted a frozen relationship into a bubbling relationship. 15 years ago, there was practically no trade between India and China. Today, trade between the two countries is approaching $70 billion. That has stabilized the relationship. They've set up a commission to discuss and, if possible, resolve the dispute as far as the borders are concerned. And that is the way forward for India and Pakistan. It will happen. The first step has taken place in the sense that the most favored nation status, which has been extended by Pakistan in a reciprocal manner, is the first step. This is the launch pad for an economic cooperation which will ultimately convert whatever disputes there are between the two countries into a dialogue and therefore a mature way forward. It's going to happen. And alongside that, there will be a dialogue between the state authorities in Indian-controlled Jammu and Kashmir, the Indian authorities and the people of Jammu and Kashmir. That too will take place. But they are two different issues, and they will over time be resolved. Because at the end of the day, there's only one thing that India desires. Because as people have said, I suppose there is an element of agreement on the panel, that India is on a fast track. India only wants peace. And a peaceful, progressive, prosperous Pakistan is in India's best interest. That is exactly what India wants. India wants a stable Pakistan. India wants a Pakistan which is a successful Pakistan. And today the internal problems do not give Indians any joy.
Okay, Ashish, I think it is something. Long answer to that short question. Because there's the gentleman back. Oh, it's a lady here. Yes, please give your name and.
Good evening. My name is Dina El-Shnawi. I also work for Al Jazeera English. And my question is, it's easy, as we've been able to see this evening, we get caught in the game of pointing fingers, and instinctively we revisit events of the past and grievances of the past. My question is, and this could be one person from each side, so to speak. What are the
side?
I know about my side.
the best and worst scenarios moving forward, and is it possible for Kashmir to achieve real progress moving forward independently of India and Pakistan? Thank you.
Do you mean as an independent state?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Mirza, why don't you answer that?
Yes, absolutely. Short answer. Yeah, why not? There's smaller regions in the world who function.
What is it going to take?
What do you mean?
What is it going to take? Best and worst case scenarios for Kashmir moving forward, because we've been talking a lot about what's happened.
The best case is you have to talk to the people of Kashmir. That there is nothing. India cannot hold Kashmir forever against the wishes of Kashmiris. That's completely clear. I mean, as far as as I said, we've seen everything. It's been proven last 60 years. It hasn't worked. Everything India has done hasn't worked. People talk about elections. I know how elections happen in Kashmir. The chief minister who was elected in the election, where was mentioned, himself said there's an election for roads and governance, not for resolving the Kashmir dispute. The chief minister was elected. So we've been there. Elections have happened, military crackdowns have happened, everything have happened. There's no alternative to talking to Kashmiris
Talking
directly.
to Kashmiri people, but then what? Is there an outline?
And asking them what they want to do with their future, what they want to be, what kind of state, nation they want to be. You have to ask them. There is no alternative to that.
Well, that in a way fits with what Ashish is saying, that there will be discussions. And so let's hold on.
It has already started.
Lawrence, worst and best case scenarios.
I only look at the worst case scenarios as a pessimist.
You're advocating war again, aren't you?
I mean, I would welcome our warriors for no, I'm joking, but I think I just don't think that. I mean, I don't think that conflicts are resolved by good arguments or by good grasp of history. They're won by force. The Kashmiris themselves have failed to achieve independence by force, and they will continue to do so by force. The Indian state can continue waging a war occupation, if you want to call it that. I don't call it that, but I think that it can continue that war longer. And so in the war of attrition, there's going to be no resolution that will benefit Kashmiris as you see them on that side. I think that the Indian state will have to change its tactics. I think that the especially issues relating to rapes, for instance, which receive very little attention, are things that have to be resolved, and the Indian state will have to kind of retrench from that type of action in its dealings with Kashmiris, whether it likes it or not.
Okay, thank you. There's a gentleman in the red sweater here.
My question is for...
Can you identify yourself, please?
Tom Deegan, Asian Affairs Magazine. I just want to address the Kashmiri gentleman, Imran Khan, I believe, isn't it?
No, this is Mirza.
Mirza Wahid, Imran Khan.
I'm Imran Khan. He's the Kashmiri gentleman.
You're the Kashmiri gentleman.
He's the fast bowler. He's the batsman.
First time I've heard that joke tonight.
It's the way you answered the young lady's question from Al Jazeera. You said, yes, of course, Kashmir, you can be independent and you will thrive and succeed with great consultations. Are you seriously saying that Pakistan will allow an independent Kashmir to exist? They will annex you. As soon as the Indians move out, Pakistan will annex Kashmir. That is what it intends. And when you described the Indian occupation of Kashmir in the valley as brutal, how do you describe the Pakistani occupation of Gilgit-Baltistan and of Azad Kashmir? And do you know, I can tell you why you won't see any demonstrations in Azad Kashmir or in Gilgit-Baltistan, because all the leaders have been murdered. Yeah. Murdered by the ISI. So
I have
Kashmir is a bone between two dogs.
I completely agree.
Neither dog can afford to let go. That's
I completely agree with
truth.
your second part of your question, that the other the parts under Pakistani control are run by the ISI. You know, an ISI officer in Muzaffarabad has more power than the chief minister, the prime minister of that province. I completely agree. And it's a different kind of occupation. It's more stealthy. Yeah, it's more stealthy. However, 70,000 people haven't been killed in that part of Kashmir. They've been killed in my Kashmir.
Well, okay, I think again, let's not get into
but that doesn't
game.
negate the 70,000 people killed in this Kashmir, does it? Yes. So the first question, that will it succeed? These are, you know, the Indian state also puts out caveats like that, which are excuses basically, which I think are colonial excuses that say the natives don't know how to govern themselves. What will they do? What will they eat? You know, you don't know how to govern themselves. That is something we've heard like for centuries, and I find it slightly condescending and patronizing when you tell people you don't know what you will do. How will you survive?
Just
you know, can I finish? So is any of that an excuse to deny people their right?
No.
Go.
Okay,
you go to the Kashmiri people, you ask them what they want to do.
Thank you very much. You've had your question. We have a lot of questions there. There's a gentleman in the back now with the microphone. Can you identify yourself?
My name's Matt Whitcase. I'm an NGO worker, and earlier this year I worked for an international peacebuilding organisation called Conciliation Resources, which through peacebuilding civil society partners and actors on both sides of the line of control has been successful in opening up a trade across the line of control. It's a very... I don't want to over-egg this. I mean, the points of difference have been very powerfully demonstrated tonight, but there are at least green shoots of peace-building activity across the line of control. And Kashmiris are trading across this line of control. Families are being reunited as a result of the trade. And what's compelling is that many of the actors in this trade, or the traders, are former combatants. They've turned from combat to trade. And the trade has survived vicissitudes at state level between India and Pakistan, and even survived the Mumbai attacks in 2008. This trade is real, and it's working at that very sort of low level. So my question is, what's the panel's reaction to sort of civil society bottom-up attempts at peace building across the line of control, however sort of small they may be within the overall picture?
Just from the Pakistani side of things, let me tell you that Sorry.
Yes, no, I'll let you take the floor on that one.
Yeah, basically, they play politics with it. Everybody I've spoken to off the record, nobody will go on the record with this, but they'll tell me off the record, Yes, we'll allow trade. Yes, we'll allow a bus route. Yes, we will allow this person-to-person contact. But the minute there's any political tension, the minute there's anything that goes wrong between the relationship in India and Pakistan, they will pull that access. It's political, and it's political, a football that they use. It's very, very encouraging. I was there in 2008 on the border watching those trucks of vegetables go across. It was a brilliant, brilliant sight to see. But the minute there was tension between Pakistan and India, they closed the borders, and it's yes, those green shoots are great, but it's within the framework, and particularly on the Pakistani side, it's a political football, and they will use it.
Are we not talking about a peace dividend? And that's what I think we all will agree we
that's
want to see.
absolutely
We want
yeah.
to see a dividend for having peaceful relationships and peaceful interaction rather than
But
a
again,
vested interest in conflict.
once those two sides use the Kashmiri issues, this football to bat around between them, and the Kashmiris are forgotten, I don't think you can move on. I keep saying this. It's the Kashmiri voice that now needs to be heard.
I think, well, I mean, I'm a political economist, and I've in fact written study. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with my conclusions, but generally I find that the expectation of trade between India and Pakistan resolving and making an effect at the local level, at this level, is nil. There's really, for many reasons, very little trade congruence between India and Pakistan because Pakistan exports primarily textiles, for instance, and is one of the leading exports for India. So there's very little likelihood of trade between India and Pakistan at that level. And the screen shoot.
We're talking intra-Kashmiri trade. That's what we're talking.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, of course, we know that there's been centuries probably illegal trade between both countries. I mean, both sides of the border, and I've seen satellite imagery of these kind of at night. You see people kind of coming back and forth. So, but it's not going to contribute whatsoever to peace. What's going to contribute to peace is either a resolution of one type or the other. One side wins this struggle, namely in Kashmir or the Indian armed forces. That's what's going to.
I would slightly disagree with Lawrence there, because it was said when India and China signed the Peace and Tranquility Treaty, and trade was obviously on top of the agenda. The same argument was made that these are two competing economies. What are they going to trade about? But look at what's happened today. $70 billion of trade, about to reach $100 billion maybe in the next 5 to 7 years, if not earlier.
But
so I think there is an element, even within the two Punjabs, the East and the West, there is so much potential of trade. From small trade, in terms of volumes from there onwards, it has enormous potential.
But let's hang on to that word, potential. There's a gentleman there in the orange tie who had a question.
Thank you very much.
Could you identify yourself, please? Thank you.
Okay?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Khalid Majid, and I am Councillor Political, Pakistan High Commission, London. I don't have questions. I have just 2-3 points to make.
Oh dear. Can you make them very briefly?
Very briefly. First, about the elections in held Kashmir. I think the UN resolutions have already declared that elections are no replacement to the plebiscite. That is very much clear. Second, about Sino-India trade. Well, we very much welcome that, and we wish them best of luck, and we do pray that they reach their target of 70 billion or 100 by 2015. But that is a different dispute as compared to Kashmir. While we talk of Sino-India dispute, that is a border dispute. But when we talk about Kashmir, we are talking about more than 10 million people. It is their aspirations. So you can't compare two disputes to draw a conclusion. And third is the comment about my friend who has made that if India leaves Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan is there to engulf it. I don't know whether my friend has visited Pakistan side of the Kashmir or Gilgit or Baltistan. If yes, then I'm surprised on his comments. But if not, I can offer him and I can facilitate his visit to Pakistan, Kashmir.
That's very generous of you. Perhaps you two can see each other afterwards.
What is this?
Can you facilitate my visit?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
Because I would like to see what happens on the other side.
Yes, this gentleman there, and then we'll take that lady there. This one here. Yes, thank you.
I am Nishit. I'm a freelance journalist. I think
Nishit, where are you from?
I'm a freelance journalist.
Okay, fine.
I think a very central issue is that there is no communication from the Kashmiri people that's being allowed to be heard on the international platform. But obviously, it's so entrenched in a nationalistic sense on both sides. I'd like to pose this question to Mirza and Lawrence. Do you think that a way of empowering and strengthening the Kashmiri voice is engaging the Indian and Pakistani public, because, I mean, we're talking about a nation of 1 billion and 190 million. Honestly, when an Indian meets a Pakistani, the last thing they do is talk about Kashmir and who owns what and what side it belongs to. So, do you think that's a viable?
Civil society.
Do you think the public of both countries have any sort of contribution to make to empowering the Kashmiri voice?
I think they should. Yes, Delhi is about an hour and a half from Srinagar, and for the entire 90s, for the decade, nobody came. They didn't report Kashmir, and I would wonder what's wrong. You can just fly and do it. It is Kashmiris are writing now, and they're making. They're as somebody said, they're throwing books as opposed to stones and bullets, and they're making websites and in media and everything. And this is the main sort of. The core of that effort is that people should know more, because I personally found Indians and Pakistanis, I don't mean to offend anyone, colossally ignorant about what goes on in Kashmir. They didn't. I mean, somebody once said to me, "Oh, so do you live in on the hill?" I said, Srinagar is one of the oldest cities in the world, So he had this image that all these people, they must live in the caves somewhere. In the mountains. So yes, they don't know much, and Kashmiris are sort of now taking it upon themselves to do the educating of Indians and Pakistanis. Somebody's talked about peace. It's wonderful. It's a lovely word, and it's very insulting to a lot of women in Kashmir when people, especially the authorities, talk about peace. And somebody recently, the state chief minister, perhaps talked about a peace and reconciliation commission. He didn't even know that peace and reconciliation happens after apartheid ends. It cannot happen on the terms of the oppressor or the occupier. These women, they have lost their husbands, children, and brothers, and whoever. There are about 10,000 of them. They're called half-widows because they don't know what happened to their men. When you tell them about peace and trade and everything, they find it insulting. They find it a romantic Western construct, because there is no peace without justice. And as our famous poet said, they make a desolation and call it peace. It doesn't work that way. And for people to understand that emotionally as well as intellectually, you have to go there, or at least read and see and watch a film called Jashn-e-Azadi by filmmaker Sanjay Kaak. It tells you what it is really like.
I think the pain of Kashmiris hasn't actually been covered here, as you say, with it's 10,000 half-widows because they can't remarry. That's why they're called half-widows. Lawrence, are you good? You want to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's wonderful to watch films and read books. I hope you win whatever awards you do to win, and I think that's great. I think, and I agree with him that there is a great deal of ignorance about Kashmir from both sides. I think there's a great deal of ignorance from Pakistanis about Indians and Indians about Pakistanis, and I think that of course, as an educator, I would prefer that everybody would learn from each other and act accordingly. But I just don't think that that's going to really resolve the problem.
Just before, I'm sure the gentleman from the Pakistani High Commission is going to vehemently disagree with me on this, but there is another side to this. You ask about Pakistani and Indian people. You have to realize that one of the reasons Kashmir is, and Pakistanis do care about it, but one of the reasons is because it facilitates such a large army that Pakistan has. The military presence, Pakistan's military presence within Pakistan, its impact on daily life is framed because they fear a war against India. And Kashmir is a central part of that. You want the army to have the funding it has in Pakistan. You want the army to have the place it has in Pakistan. It needs a bogeyman. That bogeyman is India, and the key part of that is Kashmir. So it's, the Pakistani people for so long have just accepted an army presence. And that's partly the reason. So when you're thinking like that, with that mentality, it's very, very difficult for you to think about an independent Kashmir.
We're rapidly losing sight of my word potential. I'm going to ask this lady here. You had the question, and there's a couple more here. I'll let you come in a minute, Ashish, but we just want to hear the views, and then we'll have a roundup session of everybody.
Hi, my name is Ipshita, and I'm a student at SOAS. What is the operational framework that you suggest which would adequately address the aspirations of the Kashmiri people without falling into this trap of India and Pakistan's obvious interest in the region, either during this process of referendum or whatever you may like to refer to it as, and if independence is what is chosen, how taking ahead from what he said, how do you plan to really keep out of the obvious politics that would ensue from that?
The questions to me is
it
the
for me?
framework.
Yeah.
Yes.
The framework is simple. The first thing we have to do, and there's no alternative to that again, is demilitarization. You get the troops out. You cannot have armies in people and, you know, hundreds and thousands. You demilitarize Kashmir first, you know. And I'm saying both sides. I don't just mean, you know, Indian occupied Kashmir. I also mean Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Both sides leave, you know. And then you begin the process of consultation with people, all Kashmiris. I don't mean just the valley. I mean Kashmiris everywhere. And that's how you take it forward.
Who should be the interlocutor to, you know, oversee this whole process? Because both sides have vested
I am
interest in
sure that won't be such a logistical nightmare. They can agree on somebody who's nice enough, good looking, and, you know.
I volunteer.
You know.
You've got
And
to
what was the other
volunteer.
part of the
Lawrence.
question?
Yes.
What was the other part of the question?
But it was essentially the framework.
Yeah.
I think
Mm.
make sure that this is a free process, and again, it doesn't get into, you know, the politics that was developed.
I will make sure it's a free process. I'll go there and seriously, I'll check everything. No, that's the fundamental thing that needs to be done. You have to demilitarize, and you have to get rid of these daft laws.
And that's happening now, right?
No, the law is still there.
I mean, there is a move to...
Yeah, they're talking about it, but nothing has been. The army said no. We want this law. We want to kill and not be punished.
Okay, right. Let's have this gentleman with the T-shirt with the heart on. Is it a heart? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I love Kashmir. Right. Okay.
My name is Amir. I'm from Indian occupied Kashmir as well. Just want to ask the panelists from Indian side here. I mean, what really would it take for India to understand what Kashmiris are saying? We've been saying this from last 50, 60 years now. 60 years. I mean, I've seen my grandmother, she was 85, she was brutally beaten almost to death by an Indian soldier who was around about 26 years old. I mean, I've seen my cousin who was killed, he was playing cricket. I think more than 70, 80 bullets pumped into his body. I've seen this all my life. I lived there from last, you know, I lived all my life in Kashmir. I mean, when they say there's only a small minority which talks about freedom in Kashmir, I mean, what happened in 2010 when millions of people came on the streets? What were they dancing, or what exactly were they doing? They were demanding the end of Indian occupation of Kashmir, and that's what we want. I mean, if you live in this fool's paradise that there is a very small majority or a small section of the society who actually demands freedom from India, then, I mean, then when what is it then you're discussing? What is the reason of dispute then? I mean, it's all about, I mean, we believe, I'm talking about the majority, and I've lived there all my life. All of us, all my friends, the majority population of Kashmir believes that India has occupied Kashmir illegally, and we do want an end to Indian occupation of Kashmir. So what my question to Indians is, what exactly would it take for us to make you understand that this is what we want? I mean, what exactly? Do you want to kill 12 million people in there who are protesting? They tried to protest, they came on the streets. Would it take 12 million deaths to actually understand that what we are asking for?
Perhaps we can hear from Subhash. You've been rather silent lately.
Yeah. Taking your point, some killings unfortunately have happened. As you say, in your family you have watched. Nobody can deny since you have actually seen. But killings have been done by both sides. And the militants, armed or funded by whoever, they are religious militants, they are fanatics, they have raised their voice, and if you let them succeed, you will see the Talibanization of Kashmir. Do we want that? I don't think nobody wants it.
Okay. Right.
I agree with everything you said.
Yes. We thought...
Yes. Oh, we are, every time you are just brushing aside every election that takes place. The Kashmiris are ruling Kashmir. Sheikh Abdullah's son, grandson, this, and
they are called
client they are not small fry.
They are called client elites in Kashmir.
No. This is the fundamental mistake you're making, because lots of people, they don't even want to participate in those elections. Not only on those elections, even when this literary festival was being organized a few months ago, lots of people pulled out. They don't want to face people.
I was one of the authors who pulled out of the festival because it was found that it was going to be run by a man who also organizes cricket tournaments for the Indian Army. How could I possibly?
No. It was being run by.
What are we talking about?
It is run.
We've got a few more minutes left. Let's let the audience have their questions. There's a lady here, and then there's another lady over there. We'll have the question, and then a lady at the back. We'll give the women the chance here to have these concluding questions.
Hello, my name's Sasha Kadri. I'm a journalist, and I'm from Indian-occupied Kashmir. And I have, first of all, I'd like to say that as a Kashmiri and as someone who I would like to say is objective, I have found it very hard to hear you talk about brutal facts, which are clearly wrong, and talk about collateral damage when really you should not say those kinds of things in public. And my questions are to Mirza and to Imran. To Imran, I'd like to ask, I know it's difficult as a journalist, but as you cover that area, what would you say is a good way to get Kashmir on the map so it gets a bit more international recognition? And Mirza, to you, I'd like to ask, it is true that there is no united front in the Indian-occupied part of Kashmir, and you do say, ask the Kashmiris what they want, but it's, how do you think Kashmiris can unite so it's not so divisive, so we have a strong front?
Two good questions. Imran, would you like to ask, how do we get Kashmir on the map?
How do you get Kashmir on the map? There are very practical decisions to be made by news organizations. I work for one of the, I have to say, I think I work for one of the best news organizations. But even when we're making decisions as to what we should cover and where we should go, Kashmir really doesn't come into it. And there's a very simple reason for that. It's an intractable conflict. It's a bit like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Everybody feels they understand the narrative and everybody's bored of it. And that's the brutal, ugly truth about this. However, if you are trying to get Kashmir on the map, then I think you've got to lobby your news organizations. You've got to start writing. You've got to start speaking to people. You've got to start writing into news organizations. Why aren't you covering this conflict?
But as you say, no one ever asks from a Kashmiri perspective.
Yeah.
Not as a reporter in that area.
I did. This is the thing I've always wanted to hear from Kashmiris. I'm so, quite frankly, and I'm probably going to get told off.
Book?
I have read your book. Another book I will recommend is Curfewed Night by Bashar Up Here. Yeah. Love that book. You've got to. My argument with my bosses when I'm trying to get money for a deployment to Kashmir is, we need to go there because we need to see what's going on. And their argument to me is, what's the news peg? And that's the problem. There isn't. Kashmir doesn't have a news peg because it's been going on for so long. That's a practical media way. It's about money for news organizations.
That's a media answer to a journalist.
You know what? My friends in Kashmir said no. We don't want oil.
Yes, I was going to say probably make
what happens in Iraq.
Yes,
so we had another occupation.
Can you answer
the question?
Yes, on
what
unity.
was the question?
Well, it's on unity, the Kashmiri voice.
Yeah. It's a complex question. There are many reasons behind the divisive nature of separatist groups in Pakistan, in Kashmir. It's not as simple as it looks like. Yes, there are factions and everything, but there are reasons behind that. Kashmir has about 100,000 intelligence operatives. There's a grid called the intelligence grid, which means there is a spy in every mohalla, we call it, which is the locality in Kashmir. This is how occupations work. That has also gone into making divisive politics possible. That is not to say that the separatists themselves are not to blame. They haven't been able to project a united or even a unified vision statement, so to speak. However, that is no excuse. They have to sort of bridge their sort of differences and present a united front.
Who's going to make that happen? We need a leader.
I cannot do that. Because I'll rather write. No, there's immense pressure from the people. Last summer, and I keep going back to this because this last summer is going to be, and mark my words please, is going to be the landmark year for Kashmir. What happened was the people of Kashmir forced some of these leaders to present a united front. Even when they said things that were sort of slightly, that differed from the people's aspirations, they forced them to sort of stay indoors. They led the leaders.
I'm just going to say very quickly. You don't need a leader. Look at Egypt. Egypt was a leaderless revolution.
I mean, it would help.
A young person's voice.
I think we can
And the
discuss
small
leadership.
thing about collateral damage, that we know it was famously used by Messrs. Bush and Cheney. So I don't think you should think too much about it.
Okay.
It is wrong, but that's what I'm...
There's a lady here who wanted to ask a question. It's okay, my question was answered. Oh, it's been answered, fine. The lady at the back?
Hi, my name is Safura, and I'm also, like a few others, from the militarized Valley of Kashmir. My question might have been covered somewhat in the discussion, but I wanted to say I think all of us can recognize that the discussion or lack of discussion on Kashmir and India's stance in response to talking about Kashmir or in response to discussion on Kashmir is very unsophisticated. Usually it comes down to, no, this is an internal issue, we will not discuss it. You know, people, other countries who bring it up in international forums are told to stop because it's an internal issue. So the gentleman speaking about India and saying that a discussion will happen, to me doesn't seem very legitimate, because it's not backed up by a resolve on the part of India to show that it actually acknowledges that there is something to be discussed. And on that issue, I think that, you know, Kashmiri citizens are somewhat, you know, portrayed as being kind of rogue citizens of India. I mean, citizen is a term they would dispute themselves, but that is kind of acknowledged. But further to that, I want to ask anyone who wants to contribute, but more the gentleman speaking from the Indian perspective, what is the excuse or what is India's validation for the way it responds to Indian intellectuals and academics and lawyers, such as Arundhati Roy, such as the lawyer who is the lawyer for Anna Hazare, whose name I've completely forgotten.
Prashant Bhushan.
Prashant Bhushan, exactly, and other such intellectuals and academics, and you know, people who will speak about the issue in Kashmir, you know, but they have been also ostracized by India with charges of sedition, etc., etc. So, what would be the Indian clarification and to suggest to clarify that we do actually want a discussion and we won't just write off people who have a slightly different opinion to the political line? You know, how would you respond to that?
Okay, there you are.
Well, I think there's constant discussion on Kashmir. There's no restraint of any kind. And there's no dearth of criticism of the Indian government or Indian authorities or state authorities as far as their handling of Kashmir is concerned. India is a functioning democracy. And there is, whether it's the free press, whether it's the free television that we now have, or civil society, people are raising issues all the time. People have been on the streets bringing the government to its knees on corruption. That is what India is about. It's a bubbling society. Therefore, there will never be any check on the discussion of Kashmir. This evening, if I may say so, we've heard emotive terms like occupier and oppressor. These are terms which I would not use. The fact of history is something which we need to respect. The handover of power to independent India and to Pakistan was a constitutional handover. The Indian Independence Act, as passed in the House of Commons on the 18th of July 1947, is the instrument which is the basis of everything that we have in the subcontinent. Now, if you follow that, it wasn't a revolution that brought India independence. It wasn't a revolution that brought Pakistan its birth. It was a constitutional transfer of power. And that was very simple. The simple truth which a lot of people here, I'm sure, would know, is that a Nawab or a Maharaja had three choices: either to join India or Pakistan, or neither. In the case of the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir, he chose to do neither. And he signed what is known as a standstill treaty with Pakistan. This treaty was violated with the infiltration from the Pakistani side, and what we have today, the 1/3 of Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, is nothing but a result of an invasion. So but I still don't use the term Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, because please, I still don't use the term because these are terms which are extreme, which are sweeping, and which are not factual. The fact of history is that it was the Maharaja who ultimately signed an accession of treaty. There's a nonsense which goes around that he did so under duress. He never did it under duress. There was an agreement signed, duly signed, between him and Lord Mountbatten, who was then the Governor General of India. Now, there is this. Of course, there has been disaffection among a section of Kashmiris about joining India. But the fact of the matter is, at that point of history, the undisputed, the most popular by far leader of Jammu and Kashmir was Sheikh Abdullah. And had there been a plebiscite at that time, what was it guaranteed upon? The withdrawal of all Pakistani forces from the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. It hasn't happened till date. So, no, he was not. That is again a myth which is again repeated. The fact of the matter is that let us not use terms like oppressor and occupier, and it is also sensible to put out figures which are truthful and not exaggerate. Instead of saying 1 million people on the streets where there may have been tens of thousands, I think it is better to say tens of thousands. Where 1,000 unmarked graves have been found, let us say 2,000 and not 8,000.
It's 8:30. It is 8:30, and we have to call a halt. I want to just give 1 minute to each of the other panelists to give us summing up. I'm sorry, I don't have time now. I think maybe you can have any more questions. Minister, a very, very brief comment, very briefly. Excuse me, could you not speak from the floor? We're just summing up now, thank you.
Briefly, although the speech took a long time, this selective lesson in history, I mean, we've all read history. You left out many things. The UN Charter is still there.
It is absolutely invalid. It has lapsed. It has lapsed.
It's invalid because in India.
Could we just have one word on the future of Kashmir and what you hope to see if we're sitting here, if we're invited back in 5 years' time? We might not be.
In one sentence, I mean, the Indian army has to leave. That's it. That's a starting point. Yes. Nothing can happen if that doesn't. I know this from experience, from being a Kashmiri, from living there. And I challenge the gentleman to live for 1 month in Srinagar, under this rule. I can guarantee you will come back and saying it's an occupation.
Okay, thank you, Mirza. Imran, 1 minute, 5 years' time, where do you think we might be?
I think we're going to be in the absolute same position, and the framework, the narrative is going to be the same. My wish is that Kashmiris themselves now get their own voice, and we're starting to see that with people like Mirza Waheed. And what we need is reporters. We need journalists. Some very, very obviously clearly journalists in this room. Go there, cover the conflict. Do what you think needs to be done, because the Kashmiri voice for so long has been drowned out by India and Pakistan. And I've covered it, and I know that quagmire. So for me, it's about the Kashmiri voice. I want to hear more of that.
Thank you. Subhash, you were optimistic at the beginning of our talk.
Yeah, I'm still optimistic, very optimistic. And I'll just quote a few words from Benazir Bhutto, which she said during her exiled years, political exile from Pakistan, 3 years before her assassination. She said in New Delhi at a conference organized by Hindustan Times about what we think ahead, what can we think ahead for Kashmir. 3 years before her, she spelled out her new approach, I would call it, and she said, and I quote, I'm looking for soft borders. One is the line of control in Kashmir, and one is a soft border over the whole of Indo-Pak gamut. Since India and Pakistan are divided on the solution of territory, we have suggested that this be looked at later. Let us instead look how we can socially unite the people of Kashmir, how we can culturally and economically unite the people of Srinagar and Muzaffarabad without going into the issue of whose territory it is, unquote. And in a similar way, I mean, if we...
Can we end on Benazir, because we must give Lawrence a chance. Okay. And thank you very much. I think it's a good point.
Yeah, Benazir's not here. I'm here. I think that in 5 years we'll be in the same situation, but I think actually it's going to be worse. I think it's going to be a revival of violence. I think it is clear to me that this situation of a relative calmness now is not going to last long, and I think I think it was Mirza's worst case scenario of revival, the violence, and it's very unfortunate. I think it's the worst thing for Kashmiris to move in that direction. Whether they're forced or whether they feel that they're forced is a different matter, but I think that's where I think Kashmir is heading. In 5 years from now, we'll be saying what happened, why don't we resolve it then.
That's terribly unfortunate. We haven't actually even talked about resources or population growth. Well, I think it's upon me now to thank all of our panelists, Lawrence Sayers, Subhash Chopra, Ashish Ray, Mirza Waheed and Imran Khan, very much indeed for a very lively discussion. And if you think we're lively, it shows why the Kashmir issue, firstly, does need to be addressed, and secondly, why it's so complicated and hasn't been addressed. Thank you all, audience, very much for coming.